Stop chasing people who ignore you. Reclaim your self-respect, peace, and power. Stop chasing people who ignore you, because every step you take towards someone who refuses to value you is a step away from your own self-respect. The painful truth about human nature is that chasing rarely creates appreciation. More often, it destroys your sense of value. The more you pursue someone who has already chosen distance, the more emotional power you hand over to them. But the moment you stop chasing, something begins to change. You reclaim your attention, you rebuild your confidence, and most importantly, you recover your peace. Learning to stop chasing people who ignore you may be one of the most powerful decisions you ever make. The hardest truth is that desperately pursuing someone who has chosen to ignore you can gradually change the way they perceive you. This has nothing to do with your intelligence, kindness, or worth. It has everything to do with human psychology. People observe behavior, and behavior often speaks louder than words. When your actions repeatedly communicate that you are willing to sacrifice your time, peace, and dignity simply to receive someone's attention, you unintentionally send a message. Their attention matters more than yours. That is where the balance begins to shift. Many people confuse persistence with love and effort with loyalty. They believe that if they keep trying, keep explaining, and keep proving themselves, the other person will eventually recognize their value. But respect does not grow from endless pursuit. Respect grows when people see that you respect yourself enough to recognize when your effort is no longer being returned. There is a major difference between fighting for a healthy relationship and chasing someone who has already chosen to keep you at a distance. One can build connection. The other can slowly destroy your confidence. Robert Greene often explores how people measure strength through behavior rather than intentions. You may believe you are simply demonstrating commitment, but when commitment exists without mutual respect, it can stop looking like strength and start looking like emotional dependence. Desperation rarely creates respect because desperation communicates fear. It tells the other person that you are afraid of losing them, even if keeping them means losing yourself. Once someone recognizes that fear, they may gain emotional leverage over you without even asking for it. Think about what happens when someone ignores your message. Technically, nothing has changed except the absence of a reply. Yet your mind immediately begins creating explanations. Maybe they're upset, maybe they're losing interest, maybe you said something wrong, maybe you should send another message. Instead of focusing on your own life, you become trapped inside possibilities. Then you send another message hoping to reduce your anxiety, but you are not solving the problem, you are feeding it. Every attempt to force a response gives the other person more influence over your emotional state. Your peace begins depending on something they can choose to give or withhold. Strong people refuse to live this way. They understand that attention is one of the most valuable resources they possess. Every minute spent chasing someone who repeatedly ignores them is a minute that could have been invested in building a better future. Instead of asking, "How can I make this person notice me?" they begin asking a much more powerful question. Why am I investing so much energy in someone who has shown so little interest in investing it back? That single question can change everything. It shifts your focus from seeking approval to protecting your self-respect. People reveal their priorities through consistent actions, not occasional words. Anyone can promise to change when they fear losing access to you. Anyone can offer temporary attention when it benefits them. But consistent behavior reveals the truth. If someone repeatedly ignores your presence while expecting you to remain available, pay attention to the pattern. You do not need to argue with reality, you need to accept it. This does not mean becoming bitter or stopping yourself from caring about people. It simply means refusing to force connections that require you to abandon your dignity. Self-respect is not loud. It does not demand recognition. It quietly walks away when appreciation no longer exists. Your value does not increase because someone finally notices you. Your value was already there. The mistake was believing that another person's attention was required to prove it. Ironically, the moment you stop chasing is often the moment you begin finding clarity. The emotional noise starts fading, your thoughts become calmer, your energy returns to your goals, your growth, and your future instead of revolving around someone else's decisions. Whether that person changes or not becomes less important because you are no longer measuring your happiness by their response. That is the beginning of real freedom. You stop asking people to choose you because you have finally chosen yourself. Never forget this principle. People who genuinely value your presence rarely force you to constantly compete for their attention. Healthy relationships are built on mutual effort, mutual respect, and mutual appreciation. When all the effort comes from one side, the relationship slowly becomes a burden rather than a source of strength. Walking away from that imbalance is not giving up. It is refusing to lose yourself while trying to keep someone who has already shown you where you stand. And once you stop chasing people who ignore you, another challenge appears. You must learn emotional detachment. Because changing your behavior is only the beginning. Your hands may stop sending messages, but your mind may still be waiting for one. You may stop calling them, but you may continue wondering whether they miss you. This is where many people fail. They believe walking away is enough. But the real battle is learning how to detach emotionally. As long as your happiness depends on someone else's attention, that person still has power over you, even if they are no longer part of your life. Emotional detachment is often misunderstood. It does not mean becoming cold, heartless, or incapable of loving. Real emotional detachment means refusing to let another person's choices determine your self-worth. It means accepting that you cannot control who stays, who leaves, who changes, or who chooses to value you. The only thing you can truly control is your response. And the moment you understand that, you begin taking back the power you unknowingly gave away. Robert Greene's work repeatedly emphasizes the importance of self-control. The strongest individuals are not necessarily those who control other people. They are the people who can control themselves. Human behavior often reveals emotional boundaries. Some people withdraw attention and watch to see whether you panic. Some create distance and observe whether you chase. Others may simply become unavailable because their priorities have changed. Whatever the reason, your response matters. If every small change in another person's behavior immediately changes your emotional state, you give that person influence over your peace. Think about how often people become prisoners of their own thoughts after being ignored. They replay conversations again and again, searching for a mistake they may never have made. They imagine different outcomes. They convince themselves that one more message, one more explanation, or one more chance could somehow change everything. Days turn into weeks, and their attention remains trapped by someone who has already chosen distance. Physically, they move forward. Mentally, they remain in the same place. This is why emotional attachment can sometimes become more painful than rejection itself. Rejection hurts once. Attachment can make you relive that pain every day. Strong people understand something different. They realize that closure is not always something another person gives you. Sometimes closure is a decision you make for yourself. It is the moment you stop asking why someone failed to appreciate your presence and start asking how you can appreciate your own life again. That shift changes everything. Instead of spending your energy trying to understand another person's behavior, you invest that energy into becoming stronger, wiser, healthier, and more disciplined. You stop living inside their world. You return to building your own. One of the greatest mistakes people make is believing their value decreases because someone ignored them. It does not. Another person's inability to recognize your worth does not reduce your worth. It only reveals their priorities. Imagine carrying a diamond into a room where nobody understands its value. The diamond does not become less valuable because the people in the room fail to recognize it. Your character, integrity, potential, and abilities do not disappear because one person chooses not to see them. The mistake is not being ignored. The mistake is allowing someone else's opinion to become the measure of your identity. That is why emotional detachment creates genuine confidence. Confidence is not believing that everyone will like you. Confidence is knowing you will be completely fine even if they do not. It is understanding that rejection is not proof of inadequacy. Sometimes it simply means two people are moving in different directions. Strong individuals do not spend their entire lives trying to force every door open. When a door remains closed despite sincere effort, they stop knocking, they turn around, and they continue walking toward opportunities that welcome their presence instead of constantly questioning it. There is another powerful psychological truth. The less dependent you become on external validation, the more emotionally stable you become. Praise no longer controls your ego. Criticism no longer destroys your confidence. Someone's silence no longer creates panic because your peace is no longer borrowed from another person. You wake up each morning with direction that comes from within instead of waiting for someone else to determine your mood. That kind of inner stability is difficult to manipulate because it is built on self-respect, rather than approval. This does not mean you stop caring about relationships. Healthy relationships remain one of life's greatest blessings. But healthy relationships are built on mutual effort, not emotional dependence. They encourage growth instead of insecurity. They create peace instead of constant anxiety. They are based on choice rather than desperation. The moment a relationship requires you to repeatedly abandon your dignity just to keep it alive, you need to question whether it still belongs in your future. When you finally master emotional detachment, you discover a freedom that chasing could never provide. You stop begging for attention because you realize your attention is too valuable to waste on people who refuse to appreciate it. You stop fearing rejection because your identity is no longer tied to another person's acceptance. And once your emotions are no longer controlled by people who ignore you, another powerful skill becomes necessary: silence. What you choose not to say can sometimes reveal more strength than anything you could ever explain. Once you stop chasing people who ignore you and begin mastering emotional detachment, there is one habit that can protect your peace more than almost anything else: the discipline of silence. Many people believe every misunderstanding deserves an explanation, every rejection deserves another conversation, every cold response deserves one more attempt to fix things. But there comes a point when silence becomes more powerful than words, because silence refuses to beg for what should have been freely given: respect. One of the greatest mistakes people make after being ignored is believing they can change someone's feelings through endless explanations. They write long messages. They explain their intentions. They defend every action. They apologize repeatedly. They hope that if the other person finally understands them, everything will return to the way it was. But genuine respect is not created through endless explanations. If someone genuinely values your presence, honest communication can strengthen the relationship. But if someone has already chosen indifference, another explanation may change very little. Instead, it can make you appear more afraid of losing their approval. Robert Greene often discusses the influence created by uncertainty and restraint. Human beings are naturally curious about what they cannot completely understand. When you stop explaining yourself to someone who has stopped listening, you interrupt the pattern they expected. They may have expected another message, another apology, another attempt to hold on. Instead, they encounter silence, not silence born from anger, not silence designed for revenge, but silence born from self-respect. That difference matters. You are no longer trying to control their opinion. You are simply refusing to waste your energy where it no longer has value. Think about how often people lose arguments they never needed to join. Someone misunderstands them, someone criticizes them, someone questions their character, and immediately they feel the need to respond. Before long, they are trapped inside conversations that steal hours, days, or even months of emotional energy. The problem is not always the disagreement. The problem is believing that every person deserves access to your explanation. Strong people understand that not every opinion requires a response. Not every misunderstanding deserves correction. Sometimes the strongest answer is allowing your character to speak louder than your words. Silence is often mistaken for weakness because it appears passive from the outside. In reality, silence requires extraordinary discipline. It requires you to control the urge to defend yourself. It requires you to resist the desire to win every argument. And it requires you to overcome the temptation to force another person to recognize your value. Anyone can react emotionally. Very few people can remain calm when their ego is challenged. That calmness is what separates emotional maturity from emotional dependence. Every emotional reaction can teach people how to influence you. If someone ignores you and you immediately chase them, they learn that distance makes you pursue. If someone criticizes you and you instantly defend yourself, they learn that criticism controls your attention. If someone withdraws their approval and you panic, they learn that your confidence depends on their acceptance. But when your response is calm, measured, and intentional, those patterns begin to disappear. People can no longer predict your emotions because your decisions are no longer controlled by fear. Of course, silence should never replace healthy communication. If someone genuinely cares about you and a misunderstanding occurs, mature conversation is often the best solution. But there's a difference between communicating with someone who wants understanding and repeatedly explaining yourself to someone who has already chosen indifference. One builds trust. The other slowly destroys your dignity. Wisdom lies in knowing the difference. Silence also creates something incredibly valuable: space for reality to reveal itself. When you stop chasing, stop explaining, and stop forcing conversations, people's true intentions become easier to see. Those who genuinely value you will make an effort. Those who only appreciated your constant attention may quietly disappear. That realization can hurt, but it also brings clarity. And clarity is more valuable than false hope because it allows you to invest your life in relationships based on mutual respect instead of one-sided effort. Many people fear silence because they mistake it for losing. They believe that if they stop talking, stop explaining, or stop chasing, they have somehow admitted defeat. But real defeat is losing yourself while trying to convince someone else to recognize your worth. Walking away from endless explanations is not surrender. It is choosing peace over temporary validation. The strongest people understand that dignity is not preserved by winning every conversation. It is preserved by knowing which conversations are no longer worth having. Eventually, silence becomes more than the absence of words. It becomes evidence of inner confidence. It shows that your identity no longer depends on another person's opinion. It shows that your self-respect is stronger than your desire to be understood by everyone. And once silence becomes a reflection of confidence rather than pain, you reach another level of personal growth. You begin building a purpose so meaningful that you no longer have time to chase people who have already chosen to walk away. After you stop chasing people who ignore you, master emotional detachment, and learn the discipline of silence, one question remains. What will you do with all the time, energy, and attention you have reclaimed? If you simply stop chasing people without giving your life a new direction, you create an empty space, and eventually old habits may return to fill it. That is why the goal is not simply to walk away from the wrong people. The goal is to walk towards something greater, a purpose, a mission, a future, a life so meaningful that wasting your energy on people who have chosen distance no longer makes sense. One of the biggest reasons people continue chasing others is not necessarily because they truly need those relationships. Sometimes it is because they have nothing larger pulling them forward. When your life lacks purpose, every rejection can feel like the center of your world. Every unanswered message becomes a major event. Every person's opinion carries more weight than it deserves because your identity lacks a stronger foundation. But when your life becomes driven by meaningful goals, personal